All right, so now on this one, I want them to be talking to each other. So a couple of things need to happen here. I'm going to need to talk about speech bubbles and how we use those. But based upon what they say, I may need to bring in some other objects, and we'll see that here in a second. So let's go ahead and let's have robot talking. To do speech bubbles with Google Presentations, you're going to go back to your Insert menu, and you're going to go to Insert Shapes. And what you'll do is go over to Callouts. So Insert Shape and Callout. Now I'm going to use this rectangular callout for the robot. Since he's a robot, we'll keep him rectangular there. And then for the penguin, I will go ahead and Insert Shape Callouts. We'll go with more of a circular one for him, and we'll get him put in there. And so at this point, I could come into these callouts, and I'll go ahead and recolor them real quick. We'll go ahead and make this maybe white. And we'll make this one white as well so that we can see the text a little better. And all you guys have to do is double click in there. Just double click and robot could say something like, hey penguin, what are you doing? Now because he's a robot, maybe we want to change his font to something a little bit more robotic, so we could go up to the fonts here. Let's go with like Courier New. That looks a little bit more robotic there. We'll get my exclamation mark back in there and maybe make it a little bit larger font there. And the same thing for penguin. We'll say something like, we'll have him do something like just digging under the house, because we're talking about learning the word foundation. So we'll have him say he's just digging under the house. We'll go ahead and make his text a little bit bigger there as well. Very good. Now, what else could we do on this page? Well, a couple of things. Oops, let me make his speech bubble a little bit bigger there too. There we go. All right. I probably need to give him a shovel. So what I could do is I could pop back over to our OpenClipArt site, and I could go find a shovel real quick. Because if we want him digging, we're probably going to need to give him a shovel. We'll just grab any one of these. This one looks perfectly fine. We'll grab the round point shovel, get the PNG version of it, do a quick copy and paste of that. So we will copy that image, and we'll paste it in here. And here comes our shovel. Make that much smaller for him, and we'll give that to Penguin. Now, one of the things you can do is you can also change the angle of things. So right now, that might not be the best way for him to be holding it. You'll notice there's a little circle at the top that I can move, and I can change the angle of that. So I could go ahead and straighten up that shovel or have it pointing whatever direction we might want it to be pointing. So there we go. Now another thing that's worth mentioning here is grouping. A neat feature in Google Presentations is you can group items together if you think that you might need to move them later and you don't want to have them coming apart. Because right now if I grab the penguin and I go to move him, he's going to be separate from the shovel, and the shovel will be separate from him. But one thing you can do is you can click and drag a box around multiple things to grab more than one item. At that point, if I right-click on them, I can go to Group, and now they become one item. So that if I grab one of them and move it, the other one moves with it as well. And so that's a nice thing if you end up building some things that are a little bit more complicated and have a lot of stuff in there. Now I can always ungroup them. If I needed to say, whoops, let's get those ungrouped and let's move that shovel over just a little bit. And then I could go ahead and regroup them again. There we go. Before we move on to our next slide, here are some other things we might want to talk about. One is animations. We've got Penguin and Robot and Penguin chatting here, but it might be fun for it to come in first Robot and then Penguin, showing what it is they're saying. So let me talk real briefly about how you do animations. Basically, you go to Insert and you choose Animation. Whoops, got to choose something first. Let me choose his text bubble there and say Insert Animation. And what I can do is I can choose different ways to animate it. Now I'm just going to say that I want it to fade in, but I could have it zoom in and spin and do all kinds of stuff, and your students might. I'm just going to say that it's going to fade in, and I'm going to have it fade in after whatever happens before that, so the student doesn't have to click. So when the slide loads, I'll choose after previous, meaning whatever just happened before, that'll fade in. Then I'll go to Penguin, and I'll add an animation for his speech bubble and say it will fade in as well after the previous thing. And so I can very easily go ahead and make those animated. Last thing I'll do on this page, probably want to do something with the background. So let's go in and we'll give this one a different color. We'll say it's going to be a green background. And again, if we wanted to, we could still have fun putting in shapes behind that. I will give them something to stand on, though. We don't have anything for them to stand on. So let's insert some ground for them. Let's just put in a rectangle. And we'll put that right here. And it can be gray, but we don't want it in front of them. So here's another trick. When using Google Presentations, you can right-click on anything and you can alter the order of it. You can send it backwards or bring it forwards. So I'm going to go ahead and say, let's send this backwards. Actually, I'll say send to back. If I say send to back, it'll send it all the way behind everything else. And suddenly, they're now standing on top of that. All right. So we've got, hey, Penguin, what are you doing? Just digging under the house. Now let's say I want to make the next slide, and I don't want to go through all that work of redoing the entire thing. No problem at all. I can right-click on this slide and just say duplicate. And that'll make a new version of that slide, and then I can just change the text. So I don't really have to recreate everything. And so he could say something like, so what did you find? And then here's where we could have our word that we're learning. You could say, I just found the foundation. And so without too much work, now I could change this if I wanted to. I could move some things around and adjust stuff, or I could have a panel where, it's just one of them versus the other, so I could very easily take one off or whatever. But if you're just doing it real quick, you can just do a quick duplication there. So we've got a title slide, we've got the first panel of the comic strip, we've got the second panel of the comic strip. I'm doing a real short one here for the example, but obviously you can go as far as you want there. Another thing that we haven't talked about, though, is transitions. If I played this right now, it would work great, but it would pretty much just move from one slide to the next. Just like animations where you animate objects, you can also do an animation for the entire slide called a transition. And for that, we go to Slide and we go to Change Transition. And it opens up a special spot here on the Animations menu where I can go in and say, let's have a transition from one slide to the other. And one that works pretty well is if you say slide from right, if you're used to moving things from right to left. And I can apply that to all the slides. And so what that's going to do is it's basically going to move each slide from right to left as it brings them through. Well, let's take a look at how we're doing here, and we'll see if there's any other tweaks we need to make. But let's go ahead and run this one. So we'll go View, and we'll go Start Presentation, and let's see how it looks. Okay, so there's our first slide, Robot and Penguin. We'll go ahead and move to the next slide, and it moves across. Hey, Penguin, what are you doing? Just digging under the house. Next slide. So what did you find? I just found the foundation. And there you go. And